I'd like to welcome everybody to the September edition of the Tips and Tricks SIG. Tonight, our format will be open forum, and then we'll go into discussion over the topics which I had sent out. And I'd like to open up the floor with the first question of the evening. Does anyone have a question for the group?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Drew.
I don't know if is there anybody out there who is an Obsidian database user?
Ooh, no. What is Obsidian?
Um, Obsidian is it's a personal note-taking software. It's kind of like Microsoft OneNote or Evernote or Joplin. Um, it allows you to build notebooks full of notes on different categories and search them and attach files and pictures and uh, it's a way of how I keep track of everything.
Okay. And what do you use to maintain that database? What software does that?
Well, I
Are you
store
are
the
you thinking
primary
are you
I
thinking
store the
of you?
primary
Dennis, hold on. Drew?
my primary data store is on my PCloud,
Okay.
and that's where my synchronization that's I guess you would call my synchronization host. And so in Obsidian, you can add what they call community plugins. And somebody wrote a plugin called Remotely Save. And Remotely Save supports a few different cloud services. One of them happens to be PCloud. And so I'm using this Remotely Save plugin on Windows, Linux, and Android to maintain synchronizing my data that's hosted on PCloud. So if I add something on my phone, it appears on my computer moments later.
Wow. That's the way it all should be, isn't it?
And what's happening is there's another plugin called Orion Publisher. And what it does is it allows you to publish your notes to the internet. There's a guy that hosts them. And you put this plugin in and you create an account and you can publish your notes so that you'll get a unique URL for each of your notes that you publish. And then you could sometimes if I'm on a Zoom meeting and somebody asks me a question, I have the answer already written down in Obsidian. Rather than copying everything from Obsidian and pasting it into the chat, I often get errors saying I've posted too many characters in. And if I take the shared link, put that in the chat instead, then everybody in the meeting can go to this website and get a copy of my note. Anyway, that plugin is called Orion, and in the when you install it, it adds commands to your palette of commands, and one of them is to publish, one of them is to unpublish, and etc. And they were all integrated into the menu until today, and I checked for updates to my plugins, and 3 or 4 other ones got updated. And now my Orion plugin, all of the commands to publish and unpublish are gone. I can't choose to do anything. I tried uninstalling the plugin and rebooting and reinstalling the plugin, and nothing works.
Can you do a go back? Like a restore from a previous storage point or something?
It's not
That easy.
it wouldn't affect the data. The data is on the server. If I could, what I can do is I last made I started last month imaging my computer. So
Right.
I have a differential image that I made about 4 days ago. And what I'm thinking about doing is going back 4 days. I keep very little data on my laptop. So if I go back 4 days, I'm going to have to re-download 4 days worth of mail from the server into Thunderbird. But other than that, all my important files are on the cloud. So even my Obsidian, when if I revert my Obsidian back to 4 days ago, when the application opens, its database is on PCloud. It's not on the PC.
Okay. When I suggested going back to an earlier point, I also was referring to from last month's meeting. You said you were making a Cronus image, not a Cronus, Macrium reflect images of your system. Is it possible you could run one of those sessions that was made before you did this plugin change and see if that will get you?
Well, it was my last image was done 4 days ago, and Joplin was Obsidian was working up until today. It was working yesterday.
Okay. So again, I was going to suggest, can you run, as you suggested in the last,
I can boot it. I can
meeting.
boot it up. I can take that image and create a virtual machine from it, and run it in there, just to confirm that they are indeed there.
That would be what I was going to suggest, is you have a possible workaround, at least to confirm or deny that's what is the problem.
Yes, I can. The answer to your question is yes. I can. It'll only take about 5 or 10 minutes to create a new virtual machine, and you can then boot that machine and go into Obsidian, and it will have the software. It'll connect to PCloud. It will. It should synchronize the data, and it should have all the commands.
Okay.
It should work just,
I gave you a task.
If it does, I'll go backwards.
Yeah. I mean, at least you'll know yay or nay.
I don't know what made it disappear.
Did any of this software get updated?
The main application did not get updated, and the plugin is 2 years old. So it didn't get updated at all, no.
So no change in that.
Nope.
So what you want to find out is, was there somehow some kind of database corruption, or maybe even the program got corrupted without an update? You never know. Were there any other system updates, any other software or drivers?
No, from between yesterday and today, absolutely not. No.
Okay.
Dennis, you were going to say something and I stopped you. Dennis, you're muted. Okay, but you're muted.
And I can still get. I have the URLs of the notes that are published, and I can still get to them.
Mm-hmm.
Offhand, has anybody tried out or is running Notebook LM by Google?
Not me, no.
That's a note-taking app that has AI at its core, helps you organize things and do summaries and analysis of all your notes, make suggestions and stuff like that. I haven't tried it out myself yet, but I have a couple Chromebooks that came into my possession a couple months back, and I know it's on there. But you can get Notebook LM directly from Google, and that for Windows operating system, and it might work on Linux or Mac, but I'm not sure about those two.
Yeah, I'm all set for noting apps. I have about 3 or 4 of them that I use, and all of the ones that I use work everywhere I need them to, on Android, Linux, and Windows.
Tim, can you show us? Can you bring up this Notebook LM?
Not offhand.
Oh.
Like I say, it's only on Chromebooks, and I'd have to log one of them in, and I don't think I have Zoom updated yet.
Oh, okay. So it's a Chromebook.
No, it's a general. So
Okay.
it'll work on Windows, it works on Chromebooks, it should work on Linux,
Okay.
because Chromebook is Linux to some extent. And at the same time, too, I don't know if it works on a Mac or not. Well, all and I'm going by anybody here, I think at the meeting probably gets CCS's forwarded copy of Tech for Seniors, and the Tuesday newsletter that came out today was sent out. If you dig down in there towards the bottom, there's a whole article about it and what it's capable of.
Yeah, and it says that it's based on Gemini AI.
Yeah. Well, that's
Gemini 2.
that's their main AI agent for the time being, but I think they're working on another one.
Well, right now it's based on Gemini 2.0.
I use Gemini, Copilot. It's been a little while since I've used Claude, but I was reading an article that when you're using AI for especially computer related stuff, and it may apply to other topics as well, you got to be careful what AIs you use. The person was using it for computer stuff and found out that Claude gave the best results, and ChatGPT gave the worst response.
It depends on what you're looking at, but generally so. There's another user group I belong to that's not specifically about computers, and they've got a member who teaches a class in using AI for research projects. And right now they're comparing how various AIs, especially Claude, operate on a technical book.
I've used Claude a few times, Nat, and was always happy with the results. But using the free version, you are limited to how many times you can use it per month.
Exactly. But one of the interesting features of Claude is its ability to visualize data, to make actual visual representations of what is essentially print data, like from a book. And this can give you new insights.
Yeah, that's why they got sued for quite a bit of money. Quite a few $1 million because they violated copyright.
Well, that's a different matter. This is about having a project where you are doing an analysis of a book and it puts out a summary of that book. You own a license for that book.
That's fine if you own the book, but bottom line is they did violation. There are some AI models that are violating a structure on the internet that allows the owner or publisher of the website to say, this is not to be scraped and copied in any way, shape, or form. And some AIs are ignoring that as though it didn't exist.
Talk to me after tomorrow. This same group is going to have a talk by an attorney who deals with that aspect of copyright law. And he'll be talking to us about that exact issue.
So we'll find out at one of our next meetings.
Well, I may have enough. I will have some notes.
Okay, I know. That's what I meant. Then one of our next meetings, you'll bring up some of the information you learned.
Yeah, I could do a little mini on that.
That'd be nice.
I could do a mini presentation about that.
Just a little discussion.
It'll be my notes about this guy's talk about copyright law and AI.
Okay. But I mean, for the average user, does the average user need to worry about who copyrighted and used what? Do we need to worry about this?
Not unless you're claiming something as your own work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Plagiarism.
as me as the end user, if ChatGBT scrapes something or Gemini scrapes something, I don't care.
Yeah, but if you're in college and you're creating papers, in which case you could end up getting tossed.
Okay, but none of us here are in college. At least I don't think.
Understand that.
Okay, and we're not writing papers. I'm trying to reflect this to the users that are here and not the what if scenarios. Is the what if scenarios, yes, they can be, they can be a problem, but we're not in, the general users are not in that what if scenario.
However, those of us who do present from time to time do have to be careful about citing sources.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Including
Sure.
sources for images.
Right.
Sources for images. And some images being copyrighted, you can't just willy-nilly use them. I have used videos in presentations and had YouTube say, nope, you can't have that on YouTube.
I haven't had that yet.
I have had it happen once. Our entire group, this other group, have had it happen about 4 times.
Our group is not. I'll say that we're kind of careful here in what we, but for the most part, we're only displaying stuff from our own group. So we've been very careful here. Luckily, it's not been an issue. Okay, shall we go on to a new direction? New question? No? Yes, Harry.
Not a question, but an interesting observation about AI. So for myself, I've been the last month or so been using Perplexity. But my wife is a designer of jewelry and has a website. And I was interested in what it would look like if some of her jewelry were superimposed onto models. And the only AI that I'm aware of that gives you that opportunity is Gemini, Google's Gemini. So I showed her the photo. I mean, obviously, I understand the prompting. I've spent a lot of time studying prompting, but the do's and don'ts, what works, what doesn't work, until you actually do it, you don't know. And as you go from engine to engine, they'll be different. But about the 4th time in, I got lazy and showed it, uploaded to it a picture that not only had a necklace, but had a bracelet and earrings as well. I did not mention them in the prompt, only the bracelet. Create an image of a model wearing this, and wearing the bracelet from this photo. Only took about 30 seconds, came back with a model, did a pretty good job on the bracelet. And
you want to show us this? Can you show us this?
Also,
pictures work better than words.
Hang on 1 second, I got to find it.
And then just share your screen.
But my point is that it recognized what a bracelet was. And even though I didn't mention it, it recognized earrings and bracelet, I'm sorry, just give me a second here. So.
Yeah, so anyway, one thing that our other group has been finding about the AI and what it can do, the degree to which this fellow has elevated AI meeting summaries and visualizations is far more sophisticated than anything we've seen in our groups or APCUG. And it's quite interesting stuff he does. I don't think it's always terribly accurate, but generally he's getting really good results.
Well, I belong to a group headed by Huey Poplock, and he has taken and uses a lot of AI, including in imaging generation, and he does quite well.
So Harry, is this your
So,
wife?
no. I have no idea who this lady is.
Oh, sure.
I did a reverse search, and 2 or 3 engines. One is Google, but I don't remember what the other one was. And they could not identify her. Again, we're not doing this for a livelihood or anything. But the bracelet I pointed out in the prompt. I did not point out, sorry, the necklace I pointed out. I did not point out the bracelet or the ring, but it was in the same photo.
And the earrings.
The earring, that's correct. And the earring, so I only told it about the necklace, but it was a composite photo. And I got lazy. The first 5 or 6 times, I gave it a photo that just had one thing in it.
Can you show us the original photo that you sent it with the jewelry products in there so we can get an idea how it clipped it and put it in place?
I will have to find it.
Yeah, maybe in the course of our meeting, because this, I mean, I'm looking at this, it sure looks like this person is wearing these items.
Well, these in fact are items my wife created. I mean, I'm not disputing that. But I found it interesting that it assumed that, well, if you want this in the photo, you may also want this and this in the photo. I didn't object. My wife didn't object. But it was really interesting that it recognized what those things were and where they might go in a photograph.
And you use Gemini to do this?
That is Google's Gemini. Yeah. Now, one of their options toward the top is brand new. I think in this group, if I'm not mistaken, if not, it was this group, then it was Huey Popluck had raised the question about what's that silly name, Nano Banana? And it turns out, I think now that it is in fact owned by Google because you can access it through Google. Now, I don't know for a fact that they own it, but if you access it through Google, I wouldn't be surprised if they own it. Okay, so just interesting idea, nothing.
Oh, this is not just interesting, this is phenomenal. I mean, I really want to see the original picture that you uploaded with the items in there. But I'm looking at how the necklace looks like it's coming up around the woman's neck and how it lays there underneath the hair. And then, you know, the bracelet, how it wraps around the wrist and it's tucked up next to her sleeve. Yet it, you know, in the way I just think that what was done here, it looks like the person is actually wearing it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the usual kinds of AI artifacts that people
Exactly. That's
about.
what I was getting at. There's no artifacts.
Exactly, yeah. Let me see if I can find them.
Yeah, you keep looking. When you find it, just say I found it. Okay, and we could just keep moving on to.
Of course. No, it wasn't that important. It just
no, it is important. This is important. Anyone else want to comment or question on this? Using AI for
I'm sorry, just as a follow-up, can I show you one? It's a different set of jewelry, but can I show you one so you see what the
Yep.
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay, how do I get back to the share here?
It's down at the bottom where it's the green thing, it says share.
Share screen.
See, this can't be that hard. Harry can figure this out.
I can't make it full screen, but that's typical of what her jewelry looks like. I'm gonna get rid of this. No, didn't mean to get rid of that. Hold on.
Yeah, okay, so these are examples.
Yeah, but if I could get this out of the way, can you see? I don't know what you can see.
We see the picture of the jewelry and the file folder that has your other photos of jewelry in it.
Right. But I'm saying this is typical. This is what it looked like. But that particular photo had also, so this has the bracelet and the earrings. Sorry, this has the necklace and the earrings. Some of them have a bracelet, different combinations, you know. But the point that I was making, I don't want to belabor it, is that I was surprised that I identified the necklace, did not identify what the other items were. But there were no people involved. They all look like this. They're on a black background, the jewelry itself, but that the AI was able to identify what kinds of jewelry the other items are likely to be. That's what I was amazed about. Okay. Now I don't know how to turn it off. Okay.
Thanks, Harry. What is it? Stop sharing. Should be up towards the top.
Sharing up at the top. Up at the top of
Well,
your screen.
Yeah.
should be a little. There you go. You found it.
Okay.
Good job there, Harry. Thank you. Next question, new direction? Or has anyone used AI for photo editing? No. Has anyone used it for video editing? I'm hunting for a video editing software that's going to restore old 8mm videos. So,
Well, the way things are going, sooner or later, it's going to creep into everything, and that includes photo editing, which really, to some extent, even Microsoft's photo program, I think, has some AI capability in it for photos. So I'm sure at some point, the video editing will start getting it too, if there aren't some out there already.
okay.
It's just gonna take a little time, but it's a hot topic. So if you don't see it now, it's going to be a case by sometime next year. You'll likely have it.
Okay.
Just a quick search comes up with a few things.
DaVinci is one of them.
Yeah, if you really want to restore 8mm movies, there's a more specialized program called Topaz Video AI. Topaz.
DaVinci, by the way, it's very professional, but it also can be a bit of a headache setting it up and getting everything working to your preferences.
Yeah, now DaVinci Resolve, at least in the paid version, has something called a neural engine, which can analyze old footage and restore its original colors.
See, I could see this being the strength of AI, is restoring old photos, old videos, and things like that that are really intensive and take a lot of work.
And here's how Topaz is supposed to interact with DaVinci Resolve. You can use the free version of DaVinci Resolve to split the film into individual shots, and for each shot, they recommend using Topaz Video AI to remove grain and things like that, artifacts.
So you have to use one software to extract it and another software to fix it, and then you have to put it all back together?
Yeah, that's what they say would be the best way to do it.
Well,
And DaVinci Resolve is good at putting things back together.
okay.
Pretty easy.
Huey Poplock might have more knowledge in that particular area.
Okay.
He's on Speakers Bureau with
APCUG. Right. Okay, next question, new direction? None? Okay, I sent out a bunch of links or topics. There is one in there that I did not, that I just came up with today. And I wanted to share this one with the group before we jumped out or jumped into.
Before you,
okay.
one question
Yes.
Before you started that, were you asking if anybody had a question or a contribution?
Both. Contributions are always taken. You want to hand me money? I'll take money anytime. The society will take money. Anytime you want to hand it. No, if you want to pass off information to us, or if you have a question, please present it.
I am in the midst of a 14-day trial of a paid-for product that is a system-wide malware tracking, advertising. It looks for a lot of different bad things, and it works at the network level rather than, it's not a browser plugin, for example. So it works
it looks at
by it looks at and inspects all the packets coming into your computer and intercepts these if it detects malware coming from a particular known bad website, it will block your browser from, it'll pop up a warning message and say, we're not letting you go to this place because we've reported it as being bad. It will attempt to block phishing attempts, block trackers, all kinds of annoying advertising and pop-ups. So on Windows, it scans not only all of your browsers, and let's say you've got 4 browsers loaded. You don't have to load an ad blocker in any of them or a malware blocker in any of them, because this covers all of them at once. And it also scans your software. So if you're running some other software, when it goes out on the internet, all of its data is going to be, it's not going to let your software go out to and get malware, for example.
Is this residing on your router itself?
No, it runs on, you buy it as a pack, you buy it and you get to install it on up to 3 devices for an individual or 9 devices as a family. And I have it running on my cell phone, my Windows computer, and my Linux computer. And this particular product is the only product that I'm aware of that works on Linux. There is no other anti-malware, anti-advertising filter for Linux that works at the network level and protects all of your internet traffic.
That's largely because Linux doesn't get malware.
Well, it's going to protect you from phishing attacks,
Yeah.
tracking cookies,
Those are different.
web trackers. It's going to protect you from all kinds of nasty advertising.
Yeah, those are PUP, PUM. They're not necessarily the kind of stuff that viruses and Trojan horses are. And
What's the name of this
well,
software?
for example, it was announced to the news the other day, just yesterday or the day before, that there are now malware popping up on the mobile version of Facebook.
Yeah.
So,
And
what else is new?
my Facebook application on Android right now is being, all the data that comes into it is being scanned for malware.
Yeah. But with an app like Facebook app, it's kind of take it or leave it. If you want to use the app, you can't block the ads. You can't actually block any of this stuff. Otherwise, the app stops working.
Drew, what's the name of the software you're testing?
That could
This
also,
particular one, it's a company called Adguard,
Okay.
Adguard. They make a product that's available for free, called OpenGuard, I think. Adguard Open, or Open Home. That's what it's called, Open Home. And it competes with Pi-hole. So if you have a machine that you leave running all the time, like you would need for Pi-hole, it's a DNS level ad blocker. It's not as comprehensive. This has DNS blocking in it too, but it's more comprehensive. The free one that they have is a very good ad blocker. It's not going to block as much as this one will.
well,
Okay.
another area
Okay. Take her away.
is in, YouTube. They're getting real nasty about it, and
Teresa.
both YouTube require you to allow ads and trackers, but at the same time too, there are a lot of people that are blocking this stuff, and a lot of the content creators are using the ad companies as sponsors, paying them to pay their bills to make professionally type of video content, and some of them may start not getting money and shutting down or reducing the amount of content they create at a lower grade level than what they normally have been producing.
Well, my personal opinion is that if you're a heavy user of YouTube, subscribe to it for the premium service and get what your money's worth out of it. If you're like me, who goes up to YouTube maybe once a month and watches 1 or 2 videos, I don't want to pay $14 a month to watch, for watch one video. It's just not worth it to me.
I agree. But this is the thing, that when you start getting into certain pieces of software on your system, you may have a very good reason of your own for using it. But at the same time, too, there can be other consequences of apps not working, denial of content, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, one thing is you're not using a browser extension, so there's no way for any website to say, hey, you're using an ad blocker. The ads get stripped out before they even appear in the browser. So there's no way for the website to detect an ad blocker because you're not running one.
I wouldn't necessarily bet on it, since Google owns YouTube as one example, and they are not slouches on technology. So I'm certain there's a good probability they can figure it out and know that you're using something to block the ads.
Anybody can use the DuckDuckGo browser for free. That has its own built-in YouTube blocker. They don't stop them from doing it.
Yeah, but that YouTube blocker from DuckDuckGo is getting to the point where it's blocking fewer and fewer of their ads.
Right. And
So
I
yes,
don't.
Drew, can you put in the chat the name of that application, a
Adguard.
link or something?
Yeah.
Okay,
Adguard.
that was requested.
Yeah, and the only reason that I personally have looking at it right now is because I was looking for a product for Linux, and because there's no way to really do malware blocking and fingerprint blocking and ad tracking on Linux. And I just came across this just the other day, and I said, hey, this is kind of cool. I'm going to try it out. And you install it on Linux, and then it just magically fixes all your browsing activity. There it is in the chat now.
Thank you.
I subscribe to a competitor of this. I have been for the last few years. Another company called adlock.com, and they do basically the same thing. They run at the network level and suppress anything malicious, or they, like an antivirus program. Anytime they learn about a malicious website, they will update your PC so that it contains that in its list of known bad things. There are if you have your own list of things that you want to subscribe to, let's say you use Fanboy or some of the other filters, like uBlock Origin, if anyone is familiar with it, does its job by building in and looking at other people's extensions of databases of known malware. And this program has the ability to not import that data, but link to it so that it gets the advantage of working with more and more and more technology. And I asked ChatGPT to give me some websites to do some ad block testing, where it gives you like 20 different kinds of ads and looks for this and that. And one of them was a fingerprint tester. And I don't know if any of you have done any research on fingerprinting, but fingerprinting is essentially a makeup of all of the things that your browser can find out about you by looking at your querying your browser. And that fingerprint becomes part of it could be your IP address, because there is a way of querying your IP address through the browser if you don't have something to stop it. And Adguard will stop it from getting your IP address and location. Now, what was I just saying? Shit.
The IP address can be blocked.
Developing a fingerprint.
Fingerprint
Oh,
block.
the
Talking about
fingerprint.
fingerprint.
Yeah, so it'll read your display resolution, how many colors you can display, how many pixels you can display. It will poke and prod. What version of your browser are you running? And it has about 100 different elements that it can learn about you just by querying your browser. It learns about your computer, and it builds an internet fingerprint. And that's your unique fingerprint on the internet.
Yes.
And websites can grab this. This has technology to try and block that. But and if you go into the Chrome Web Store and the Firefox extension store, they have fingerprint blocking extensions. And I have loaded in the last 4 days about 10 of them between Firefox and Chrome, and absolutely none of them passed the test of this website that tests your fingerprint and how unique it is. I found only one way, well, 2 ways, and 2 ways only to completely block my fingerprint, to the point where this fingerprint testing website said, we can't detect your fingerprint. You have a random fingerprint. And that was to use the Brave browser. Inside settings, if you look at the Brave browser, they have a fingerprint technology that you can turn on and off. And I didn't require any extensions, just the Brave browser. And it's the only browser out of all of the browsers I tested, out of all the adware stuff I tested, all of the fingerprint blocking extensions. The only way to stop it was to use Brave. And the other one was the browser called Tor. Tor also gives you a randomized fingerprint. But it told me that I had a unique fingerprint, regardless of whether I was using Chrome or Firefox or Opera or DuckDuckGo or Brave. Brave was the only one that works.
Drew, you mentioned the Tor browser. The Tor browser, which is the browser that's needed to go into the dark web, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
Are you a person that dabbles into that realm?
I have the Tor browser loaded because I loaded it out of curiosity, but I've never been on the dark web, and I don't know what you type in to get there.
Okay, that was the kind of the question. Okay.
Usually that's the dark web.
When you load the Tor browser, it connects up to the network, to the Tor network, and from there are URLs that you can use that are not part of the standard set of URLs that you would use on the regular web. And you have to know what the URL syntax is to get to the websites.
Yeah, normally speaking, the dark web does not work in the same manner as the normal internet we all use. You got to know where you're going and how to get there.
The Tor browser uses a network called the Onion network, So let's say you wanted to do something that was, you wanted to protect your IP address. You didn't want them to know where you were, but you were not doing any heavy downloading. You were just using a mild amount of bandwidth. The Tor browser will give you a unique location in every browsing tab you use. You'll be in a different country. You'll be in Austria in one tab and London in another tab. But you'll notice that if you pay for 600 or 700 kilobits per second down, going through the Tor network, Onion network, and routing the way it does slows you down quite a bit. So it's not good for downloading large files or anything that you need your bandwidth for. But the Onion, there's a program called Onion Share, and Onion Share works over the Tor network, and the Tor network runs over the Onion network. And I loaded out of curiosity the Tor browser because I found out about this thing called Onion Share. And let's say, for example, you have the Brave browser installed on your computer. I don't know how many of you know this, but if you have the Brave browser, you have Tor. Brave has Tor built into it. And you can connect to the Tor network in Brave.
In Brave, you got to turn that feature on.
Yeah. And once you turn it on and you can attach to that Tor network, I could run on my computer. Let's say I wanted to transfer you guys some files of any kind. Didn't matter what they are. And we wanted to not use the cloud. I have a machine here in my house. I don't have one, but let's say hypothetically I had a machine in my house and I run Onion Share. I can share files through this Onion Share, and they will get a URL that's really long and complicated and looks nothing like one you would type into a regular browser. And if you try and type them into a regular browser, they won't go anywhere. If you type them into Brave while it's connected to Tor, it will be able to connect up to my computer over the Onion network and transfer that file.
Yeah, another browser that may be high in privacy. I haven't tried it yet myself. I only have it installed on one machine and I haven't gotten to it yet. It is a collaboration between Tor and Malware VPN, and it's called the Malware browser. And it's best to use the Malware with the Malware VPN to give you the highest degree of security and privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're also concerned with the, shall we say, advancement of AI into browsers, virtually taking over as the browser front end, it's a case where you might want to look at Vivaldi. Right now, they have no intention of adding AI anytime in the near future. And they may be the only browser that has that stance and will try and stay with that stance.
Mm-hmm.
Something to think
Yes,
about.
Harry.
Can I just ask Drew on that question of the fingerprint? To what extent would using a VPN every time you go online minimize the information that's available about your setup?
Your fingerprint, your IP address is only one piece of your fingerprint.
Right.
So being connected to a VPN does give you protection from them finding out where you really are. However, it's still in your fingerprint. When somebody takes a snapshot of what's in your browser, I'll actually, while we're talking, I'll go get the URL of this site, and you can look at it's easier for you guys to look at this website, and it's ad block tester, candy track browser. Yeah, I'll get it in a second. And
That's okay.
but basically, your fingerprint is a combination of all of the data that can be extracted from your browser. It can query what kind of computer you have, your memory, your processor, how many colors can it display, what is the resolution, what is your fingerprint, where do you live?
Visible even if you're using a VPN.
Absolutely.
This fingerprinting has been done for decades, and that's not a joke. So bottom line, trying to hide or mask your fingerprint is extremely difficult, not impossible.
The only way that I was able to stop the fingerprint and pass this test was by using this particular by using the Brave browser. It's the only one that did it out of like 6 browsers that I tested. But when I'll post the link to this site when I get a hold of it here.
Okay. Anyone else got a question or comment on this to Drew? Okay. Any other last questions for the group? Shall we go into our evening topics? As I was starting to say earlier, one, as I sent out the topics to everybody in the email, and also I have a copy. But I did have one more item that I added at the end, and I will share this with you guys. I don't know if you know this one, but this Tiny 11 update that is apparently available. It says here it should support Windows 11 on unsupported PCs. And I guess what it'll do is that it restricts out some of the parts of Windows 11 to make it smaller so that you can be able to install it. And I think in somewhere in here they tell you, oh, here's what it removes. It removes the following items: the alarm, mail calendar, feedback, maps, recorder, your phone, media player. Wonder about that one. And it keeps going all the way through this long list of items that it removes, but it makes a stripped down version of Windows 11 that you may be able to load onto a machine that's not capable of taking Windows 11.
Well, I'm running a copy of it on one of my machines. So,
are you running this tiny,
yes,
this tiny 11?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so
but also too, there are tons of applications out there. Chris Titus is very renowned for making a utility that'll take and strip out a lot of stuff, but you have the control of what it takes out versus somebody else's script that takes, say, everything out per se. And so if there's a feature that you want to keep, you can keep it and not have it stripped out. But there's a lot of them currently OOBE, formerly called and still exists Flyby 11. And at the end of, shall we say, a lengthy little procedure, you have additional options, including Chris Titus's code, because the maker of it works with Chris Titus and several others to create these, what they're called power scripts, that use what about amounts to command line without you knowing you are playing in a command line environment that will do all the work for you.
Mhm.
You get a graphical front end that makes it easier to use and understand. So I've been using some of this kind of stuff for 2 or 3 years now.
Okay, Drew, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. I used Flyby 11 just the other day to try it out, and it worked perfectly. I
Yes.
was able to select components of Windows 11 that I wanted and didn't want. It let me change out the default browser from Edge to Brave. It actually put Brave on the computer for me. Um, and the comment that I had was my refurb group here in Sarasota came up with some ingenuity regarding old computers in Windows 11 that I never thought of or heard of before, but they're doing it successfully. What they did is they got their hands on a laptop that had Windows 10 but qualified to go to 11, and they upgraded it to 11. Then they took a Cronus and they imaged the successful licensed version of Windows 11. And because we're a non-for-profit club, we have a formal agreement with Microsoft. They provide us with valid licenses for these versions of Windows, so there's nothing being pirated. And now all of the laptops that they have that are going out, whether they meet the requirements for Windows 11 or not, they're getting Windows 11. They have, if let's say a machine does not support the install of Windows 11, they're not installing it. They're actually imaging the hard drive. And they've been cranking out machines with Windows 11 on older hardware.
Mhm. They're not the only ones, trust me, and I have seen on eBay, and for a while I was doing communications with the vendors in many cases, where I know the machine that they're trying to sell with Windows 11 is non-compliant, but they don't specify that. And I think that should be disclosed to the buyer.
Yes, you could be getting a PC that has a fraudulent license on it.
Well, not only a fraudulent license, but at any time Microsoft wants to, they turn a little switch and all the non-compliant machines don't work, or they don't get any more updates whatsoever, leaving you more and more vulnerable every day after they turn that switch.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not know it. You may not realize it for a long time. Hey, wait, when was the last time I got an update for this
Yeah.
non-compliant 11?
So, yeah, well, you play whack-a-mole, it's somebody finds a way to get around it. Microsoft hits it over the head. Somebody finds a different way and they hit them over the head.
That's right, because I know of a lot of routines on being able to install 11 on non-compliant hardware. But the bottom line, I don't advertise it because of the fact it's not for everybody. And you may have to do things to support it that most users are not able to do. They just don't have the knowledge and skills necessary to keep maintaining it. Now, Flyby, what they are doing in the Fly OOBE and maybe the Flyby 11 versions, they're going to attempt to make it so that it will continue to keep doing at least the annual upgrade for you without you having to jump through some hoops to get the update accomplished.
Yeah, there's a lot of options in there.
Oh, there's tremendous, because if you ever look at Chris Titus's utility, Win Utils, that sucker is big, massive, and it'll take you a while just to examine cursively all the possible options in that utility. I'm not joking. You can add software right from that utility that you want on your system, and as well as taking off stuff you don't want in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, anybody else want to comment on this? Has anyone side-loaded Windows 11?
I have several copies.
Tim, when you side-loaded Windows 11, how much space did it take up?
It varies. It depends on whether you're using debloating versions or normal install of 11 on the hardware. If it's normal style, it's just as if you had a Windows 11 compliant system. If you use some of the debloating tools that are out there, that varies as to how that particular piece of software works. Some of them work after you've installed normally. Some of them work on the actual ISO image and strip it down before you install. So it varies quite a bit as to how it's going to work and what your size is going to be. Tiny is trying to create the smallest image they can, and they've come out just recently, I think in August, with a new version that's around 7 gigabytes of space. Now, the reason why I did it on one of my machines, it's an entry-level machine. It has a Celeron 2-core processor with hyper-threading. It has only 4 gigs of RAM soldered in, no changeable RAM storage, and the real storage is also soldered on. It's eMMC type storage, 64 gigs, so you can't change that either. So it's a case of if you don't like or want it anymore, you get rid of it and get something much better. But with regular 11 I had on it, it came with 11 on it. It only had at best 5 gigs of free space, which gets you your monthly updates. Good luck trying to do an upgrade to say 25 H2. On the other hand, with Tiny, I got roughly half the storage capacity empty right now. So if I wanted to do a 25 H2 upgrade, I got plenty of space for the system to crank on it. It's nothing that's fast. It's fairly slow, but it works better with the Tiny 11 because once you exceed 65% full on what's called the C drive in Windows, you start slowing down the system. And this is a deliberate mechanism built in by Microsoft.
Okay. Yes, Harry.
Yes, Sanford, just so that you're aware, about a month ago, I used the Flyby 11. It was very successful, but I did something that some people say maybe you shouldn't. One of the options is to leave your apps and settings and customization in place versus completely starting from scratch. I've left mine in place, and I think that ended up taking more space. So when you ask how much space, be aware that there could be drastically different if you're doing a complete new install versus this workaround install.
I've got to add in there, and you may not have read some of the documentation. They strongly recommend you do a clean install. And the reason is when you don't do a clean install and do an in place, that's what it's called, install, you bring along baggage that may contain problems that's going to crash the system eventually. So that's a word of warning.
But on the positive side, don't want to always be a Debbie Downer. You will get all your apps that you had on there, and they should all work perfectly. So you don't have to go and reload all those dozens of apps that you have loaded on your system. I mean, there is a plus to just doing an in-place install. It makes life a lot easier, but it may not be the best route to go.
I wasn't promoting it. It just, in my case, I want to buy time till the spring. In the spring, my intention, as you know from last week, is to buy one of the minis and, abandon this one or keep this as a backup.
I like your idea. Buy a mini. Buy a mini me. So,
well, just remember the Mini Cooper and what it's like compared to an average American car.
they're fun to drive. Oh my God, have you ever driven one?
They're a riot.
They are a riot.
But it depends upon your physical characteristics as to whether it's fun or it's a cramped space that you can barely get in and out of.
Very true. Very true. Okay, so
Got
go on to our next topic.
You got another hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pete. Yes, Pete.
Yeah, do these reduced format Windows 11 installs get rid of the problem with the security requirements?
There are umpteen ways of installing 11 on unsupported hardware. That means you have one or more features that are missing or non-qualifying to be compliant with 11. So they handle that kind of a situation, but you're also advised the updates may disappear at any time. And at the same time too, with some of these methods of going to unsupported 11, you may run into problems upgrading to the next version. Like right now it's 24.11 H2, but 25 H2 is right around the corner. And in that instance, you may have a problem now upgrading to that version. And you're only supporting the 24H2 for 18 months after they release it officially. Now, they may extend 24H2 because of all the friggin' problems they had with issues on it for 6 months, maybe a little bit longer. If that's true, that's what they did with 23H2. It should have ended in June, May or June of this year, but they've extended it to be upgrading still 23H2 until after the October update. Then you won't get any more updates for 23H2.
Oh, okay. So back to my real question. Will Tiny 11 install on an unsupported Windows 10 machine?
It's designed for it.
That's okay. That's all I wanted to know.
All of these options are to be able to take and install on unsupported native Windows 11 compliant systems, period. There's no ifs, there's no ands, there's no buts. And you're on your own.
Yeah, we all are on our own. Okay, I sent out a bunch of topics other than the one I just brought up, the Tiny 11 one. Who'd like to please pull out an item in the topic list and let's discuss it. Anybody?
This,
Well, there's
core
this,
versus logical processors looks interesting.
yeah, I was about to say pretty much the same thing.
I'm sorry, which one? Core
The
versus
one
logic?
about
Second one.
cores,
The second one.
core versus logical processors. What really powers your CPU? What goes on inside?
A lot of little squirrels running around on wheels.
That may be true in Tim's case.
Well, in my case, it's not squirrels, it's cats.
Okay, let's stay on topic here.
It's little squirrels being chased by little cats.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but anyway, cores versus logical processors is something a lot of people don't understand.
Right. So so they're talking here about the CPU, which is the central processing unit or the brains of the computer. That's the processor. And a core processor is a real hardware engine that runs a set of steps in sequence. Hyperthreading lets cores juggle two tasks at once, fooling Windows into seeing two logical processors. CPUs often have more than one core, and cores are hyperthreaded capable, but not all of them have hyperthreading.
Correct.
So you could have more cores, but you could have less hyperthreading or more hyperthreading and less cores.
I think in the 10th, 11th generation of Intel processors, I think I read at least the i5, 7, and 9 have hyperthreading. I don't know about the i3.
Right.
And sometimes you will find more advanced processors, especially in servers, which dispense with hyperthreading.
Right.
And they have reasons for doing that. Now you get into what started with ARM, but it's spreading into Intel and AMD. And that is using more cores that are less powerful. So now you have P cores and E cores. And that too will tend not to have hyperthreading. So it's getting more complicated.
This is really complicated. Why, I think wasn't hyperthreading a way of increasing throughput without increasing the cost?
Yes, somewhat.
Yeah.
By throwing more cores in it, but then they found that hyperthreading is there a problem or an issue with hyperthreading?
There are several. One's a security issue. One's a RAM utilization issue, how memory is used. Because all these threads have to go through memory and they have to be in memory in order to work.
Mm-hmm.
And programs have to be written in segments that can be hyper-threaded. And not all programs are equal in that regard. And there are other issues. What they did was they ran up against a wall where hyper-threading was no longer increasing throughput. And so they backed off on using more hyperthreads and they started using more cores.
Isn't the hyperthreading a result of programming that has to be written to utilize hyperthreading?
True.
Yes, that and also to utilize multiple cores. Because otherwise, original programs only utilized a single core. And originally, even if you had multiple cores, boot up, usually for Microsoft Windows, only used one core to boot up with, unless you made a change in your settings that would allow it to use multiple cores. And when they finally made the OS allow for multiple cores doing a task, that increased the boot time, decreased the boot time for Windows to boot up.
So they're saying here, for example, in this guy's machine, he's got 16 cores with hyperthreading. So he has 32 logical processors on a single chip.
Yep.
That was a nice machine.
There's two caches with each core that hold instructions and data that feed the CPU what it's supposed to do, and it flips back and forth between the two caches on some kind of prescribed basis, either by priority or by timing.
Now, they're also, what has been done is to do actual benchmarking. And it used to be that almost always when you had hyperthreading, if you had software that was written to take advantage of it, you would see performance improvement. But more recently, in the more powerful, faster processors, that has not been as much. There has not been as much performance increase, and in fact, hyperthreading can decrease performance in some conditions.
Yeah.
The other thing that has been found, and this is why they're going to less powerful cores, is that throwing more cores at the software, if it's written in the kinds of segments that can do this, can actually allow different tasks to be offloaded onto different cores. Like you might have vector processing, you might have math, you might have some kind of graphics, different kinds of graphics, and you might have various other functions. Sound is often offloaded onto separate processors, etc. ARM takes this to pretty much an extreme, and that's like having a whole system on a single chip, SoC.
On an ARM processor setup, you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
They tend to be more SoC.
Apple's M1, 2, 3, and 4, and the variations under each of those categories are ARM processors. However, we have a lot of ARM processors that have been around for at least a decade or more, and some of them, they cannot handle, say, Windows well. However, last year, they used Snapdragon processors to make a Windows version on ARM. You cannot get a copy of that unless you're an OEM manufacturer. And as long as it works properly and correctly, you're good as gold. But if it breaks, and they are known to break, or you want to be a Linux person and switch the machine to Linux, forget it.
Several distros of Linux did finally make it onto Snapdragon.
Well, at the moment, the biggest problem has to do with drivers and how they work in the ARM systems with at least the Snapdragon processors. It's not normal, and it's not normal for even Linux to use it. And you may end up with what it amounts to e-waste if you get such a machine.
Yeah. One thing I had to be very careful about with my Chromebook selection was not to have an ARM processor, because I knew it was eventually going to no longer get the Chrome updates, and I would want to put Linux onto it.
Right.
And at that time, there was really no ARM option for Linux.
Yeah, but we have some ARM versions, yes, but how easily they would go on a Chromebook that has an ARM processor is another question. And then you have on top of it, it only recommended originally Intel chips, but it also now applies to Ryzen chips, which can make a very, very powerful one. I didn't know anybody was making Chromebooks or Chrome boxes with i7 processors. There may even be some using a i9 for all I know. And I do know they are making Ryzen chip versions that may have anywhere between 8 and 16 cores. That gives you a lot of horsepower. And I'm going to be playing with a Chrome box that has an i7 processor. It only comes with 4 gigs of memory, which is ridiculous, but I can go 16 or more gigs on it. It comes only with a 32 gigabyte NVMe drive. I'll be putting on a 256. So it's we're going to see how that all goes down the line.
Okay, let's go on to a new subject. Someone like to pick something out?
Oh, I think it's your third item is something that should be reviewed. Seriously.
Hidden Windows tricks instantly close any frozen app.
I've come across this issue from time to time, and I know 2 of the ways, but the third way was new to me.
All right, so let's see. We all know that you could do the 3-finger salute, Control-Alt-Delete, right?
No, no,
Nope.
You can't do Control-Alt-Delete?
no, not
Why?
for some reason it blocks it.
What does?
The frozen program.
Oh, you're saying a frozen program could block it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm just saying, I just said that we all could do it, but you're specifying something, a different situation here. Where they're talking about you could do, let's see.
Task manager is one. That's what
Okay,
it's
task
about,
manager, right?
right?
And task, use task manager, which you're discussing here. So I said that Control-Alt-Delete, you could bring up task manager and then hit the, find the application, let's say as displayed here, Microsoft Edge, you could click on that and then in the bottom right, it'll just say end task or right click and then choose end task.
I've used the first 2 ways you just described, and I have had times when neither works. Now, you have the option of turning off your computer's power and hoping it doesn't scramble anything and power back up and boot back up. But there is a third option.
Okay, so they're talking, they're using Super F4.
And that's an application you have to add.
Yes, this would be an application that you'd have to add.
I have used it once and it did work fine.
Bear with me, making some notes here.
They don't mention the command prompt, just opening up a terminal window and killing a task.
You may not always get that option, and it doesn't always comply with doing what you want to do with the command prompt. And
So-
most Windows users won't touch command prompt, and even if under the threat of death.
Oh, so they only mentioned this one.
Yes,
They use, in this article, they only mentioned 2 items.
3 items.
I see task manager, Super F4,
Back up.
and what was the first one?
Well, right there.
The end task option?
Yes.
Isn't that through task? Oh, when it's down below in the start bar, you can right click on it and then choose end task, correct?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah,
okay.
you have to.
That's with Windows 11. It doesn't exist prior.
Drew, you were
Yeah,
saying?
I have this enabled on my system.
Okay.
That's a new feature that just came out with 24H2.
I think we covered this in the past in one of our meetings.
I think you did.
We turned it on your computer, I think.
Probably. How did we do that? Let me see.
It's a feature inside your settings. If you bring
Yeah.
settings, you can do a search for end task.
Okay, let's see if we gotta do.
It's in developer options.
You're right. Okay, press the Windows and the I key to open up app settings. So Windows and I. And then go to, I had this, gotta move
Developers
this.
options towards the
System and
bottom, down to the bottom. Scroll down.
I'm assuming everyone can see me on this dialog box here.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And
System. Is it system components?
No, it says for developers.
For developers. What are we looking for? What am I looking for? I mean, I'm looking for it, but I don't see it.
I don't think it's readily visible.
Just
the
do a
average
search in the box above.
System. Look, go to the system tab. That's what I'm looking for. System tab.
You're in
No,
system.
no, it's easy. It's easier than that.
System
Okay,
tab.
go to the search at the top.
Yeah, there's
And
a
put
search
it end
box.
task.
Got it.
That's what I
Search.
told you to begin with.
Task.
Task. End task.
Oh, end task.
That's what the article said.
Okay, developer mode.
And
Right.
you don't have yours turned on.
About the fifth one down.
Well, no, the reason you couldn't see developer mode when you looked at the system grouping, you don't have it turned on, so it's
Okay.
invisible. But
All
you
right.
can go down to the fourth line, end task, and flip the switch on from an off position,
Correct, which I currently have turned on.
which only exists since 24H2.
All right, so this setting, encourage everybody to turn this on, will allow you to right-click an item that's on your taskbar that's running in the bottom, and you'll be able to end it from there. So I don't know if you guys can see, but if I hit the Windows key and pull up a dialog box, I don't know if you can see this or not. The word, I have close window, end task, pin, and word.
Now understand, this end task feature and the way of using Task Manager may not always work, but they'll probably work like 95% of the time. It's that third option, if you've got it already loaded up, that might save you from taking the risk of powering off your computer and hoping it turns back on and boots up correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't see the end task if your taskbar auto hides.
Unless you hit the Windows key. If you hit the Windows key, you can bring up the taskbar from the bottom.
Providing that's working with your frozen.
Yeah,
Well,
very true, providing it's working. So
This is one
that's
of
why.
the problems with auto hide taskbar. You sometimes need it and you can't remember how to get it visible again because maybe something is blocking that feature.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have it so it disappears and not in your way all the time. So there's good things and bad things. All right, anyone else want to comment on this? Okay, let's go to another subject or another topic. Bert, would you like to pick out one? I wanted to make sure you're awake, Bert. You're muted. Bert, you're muted. There
I
he
don't
is.
have anything in mind.
Okay. Well, it's on the list.
Hey,
Well, I mean, there
for
is
Bert-
one that's on Excel. 5
Yes.
functions to instantly clean up messy Excel sheets.
right.
How
That's
extreme?
for you.
All right, where is that one?
And open source Android apps that can't run it. Where are they?
Ah, there it is.
There's a lot of new functions in Excel.
Okay, 5 functions to instantly clean a messy Excel spreadsheet. Now, this is out of my realm. Bert, you want to take the upper hand on this one?
Well, basically, these are functions that you had capabilities before, but so like a trim function used to have a left and a right and a mid, and these functions do more than one thing of those things at the same time. Or they're able to text split, which will let you say you have a name and address, a person's first name, last name in one cell, and lets it split off into 2. But there's a number of parts to these functions that they've added that sort of used to be used an ampersand to combine 2 text things with an ampersand with a couple quotes for a space in between 2 things. They've expanded on all these features to be able to do things like text join or text trim, and that's what they're talking about here.
If error.
Yeah, well, the concept of an if error is before you would get like a pound sign num error or something like that. And so if you use an if error, it sort of highlights what's happening so that it doesn't come back with the error. Instead, it comes back with an if statement was always there. But for instance, it used to be an if statement would be if this and for a positive answer, and then comma would be if it's not, it would give you a message like not found as an example. And so the if error is doing that by coming before other functions, sort of a header for other functions. As a matter of fact, one of the things they just added in the last week or 2 was a Copilot add-on to the beginning of things, so that even these functions get more and more sophisticated.
If error.
So you see, you got trim,
Yes,
trim split.
we saw the trim up in the front where, like in this particular case, they showed a spreadsheet where there were spaces in front of a name and it eliminated those buffer spaces.
So these aren't new things, but they're new functions that expand to do the same thing that the old ones did, with more capability by adding these extra functions on top of what you normally would have. And
So
there
this
are
lets you
hundreds.
also clean up garbage.
Well, that's the whole purpose, to be able to straighten out, your information so you wind up with data you can use. But the reality is they have now put in more than 100 types of these commands that you never heard of before, to try and make it more powerful. And then, of course, now you've got Copilot, which adds to it as well. So if you're in the basic thing is when you have a list of data, if you go up to just before number 3.
Wait, before number 3.
Before
I
number
was
3.
up this way. Okay. They go 3,
Okay.
2, 1.
You see a table there.
Right.
Now, most of the functions are able, we used to do things where we would have a table like this and you would do a lookup. And the lookup would be, I'm trying to find the invoice or I'm trying to find the name of somebody, and you use what they call VLOOKUP command to look down the list and look over a column. Now they have one X lookup. Before, when they did it, you could, with VLOOKUP, you could only look to the right of this of where you did it. With XLOOKUP, you can look to the right or the left. I mean, they keep expanding these things. And so if you have a list, now they have tables, and the concept of your data needs to never have a blank line or a blank column. And if you've accomplished that, then tables can automatically put in filters so that you can look down the list and filter it for a specific item or a group of items to make it more useful to get to the data.
Where was this 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah. But
I
then
mean,
where was the AIs?
yeah, well,
15,
not
20
the
years.
AI. I mean, AI, yeah.
So basically, all this stuff was really capable before, but it took much more work to get it done. You know, just looking at a name and address was a big deal to be able to split the data to different columns. And then sorting, you know, was always sort of an issue too, and sometimes could mess up your data. But once they added tables, then they added to the feature of having the capability of manipulating the data, filtering the data. And then they went further. They added the concept of pivot tables, where you could take the data off a table or a list and bring it into, make a custom format report and customize the data even more, adding calculated columns and different things to be able to add graphs and different kinds of features. And that's in a pivot table. And then they got more carried away. They then went into a Power Query, pivot query, where you could go ahead and add huge amounts of data and filter it and manipulate the stuff in the columns and make calculated formulas and have it save the routine of what you were doing so that the next month you could repeat it automatically. So, I mean, they have just had lots of add-ons to Excel in the last 3 years that are just overwhelming. And of course, there's lots of graphs. People make dashboards of this kind of data. And it all syncs between each other when you set it up right.
You know, I'm looking at this next one here, number 2, that says text split. This is something I could have used at least 20 years ago for sure, because customers used to give me mailing lists that would have conjoined fields where they'd be the first name and last name would be put together, and I need to split them out into their.
Well, and so you had to look for the space.
Right.
And then transfer the data. And that's where you had the left and the right and the mid kind of function to be able to move things around. And then somebody all of a sudden was a junior and screwed it all up.
Yeah.
And it still does that, by the way.
But I used to have to run separate subroutines just to split out the first name and last name or whatever the fields were. And it had to be, in my case, I was actually running like a DOS function and tell it to look in this area and split it into 2. And it would put a comma quote in that area. So then I could bring it into Excel after that to massage it. This would have made things a lot easier.
Yeah, other thing you have to realize is there's multiple Excels, I guess is the best way to put it. The retail versions have what they have, but don't get feature updates. The main version of Excel is part of Microsoft 365, and it has its own Excel 365 that's part of it. So there's also Excel on your phone, on your iPhone, for an example. And it's a little harder to use, but certainly you could do some editing. It doesn't have a lot of these functions. It has the basic stuff that we used to have years ago. So, I mean, there are videos on the internet that are just enormous. of different things and on Excel, if you're interested. In almost, it's almost a career, but for people who are not beginning to work with Copilot and Excel, it's going to, it has the ability right now where you can have a list of some data, maybe that data with the name and address, and you can say to Copilot, I want to spread this out in separate columns and put a summary or do a break or something and run a report. And it'll give you the coding with all those functions to be able to do it. And if you're connecting that document to OneDrive, there's a button that comes up and you push the button and it does it for you. All in Copilot. So that's more than you want to know.
So that's like macros to the 10th.
You know, yes, well, macros, you still had a program. Here, it can actually do the program for you. You put the code in with these new functions and then create the output you wanted. But
Yeah,
that's
so
Excel.
you can let the AI actually create the macro for you.
I haven't tried that, but I don't know that you need it if you use some of these Power Query capabilities.
Yeah. Been 10 years since I've been heavy into Excel, so.
Same here.
Well, they've been busy.
Yes, they have. Thanks, Bert. Okay, shall we go on to the next question or the next topic?
How about my favorite 10 Android apps?
10 Android apps. Bear with me. I knew I'd finally get somebody who was interested in something other than Windows. Okay, open source, 10 open source Android apps I can't live without. Bitwarden, very good one. Anyone want to talk about Bitwarden and using it on your Android phone?
I use it as a secondary password manager. My primary database is KeePass, but I regularly recommend Bitwarden to beginners. And I like the fact that if I'm in a virtual machine, I can just get to my database in a browser tab and not have to install the software for Linux. All I have to do is be in the browser. If I go to a customer's customer site, I can bring up the Bitwarden website without needing any software. So I don't use it for everything every day, but I keep it as a backup in case I don't have my KeePass available to me.
Okay, the next one is VLC.
Yep, very good video player.
Excellent video player. I use it on almost all platforms. Anyone that want to comment? VLC is what is that? Video LAN something? Forgot what the acronym is. VLC player. Let's see if it tells you. I know it doesn't tell you here what it is, but anyone not know what VLC is? Didn't think so. All right, number 8, Binary Eye.
That one I had never heard of before.
I've never heard of this. It is a go-to app for scanning and generating barcodes or QR codes. Generating QR codes. Binary Eye. Never used it.
I don't know why it would be a 10 essential tool. I mean, it seems like it's more of a specialty tool for somebody who wants to embed codes.
Yeah.
Well, I'll
Um,
give you one little tip, and this goes way back to when QR codes were barely mentioned. It's a case where, okay, you got friends over and they want to use their smart device, like a phone or a tablet, on your network. And you don't want to give them direct access to the network. So you set up a guest account on your system with a password, and you put the phrase into a QR code. You show them that screen, they take a picture of it, and it connects them.
You know, actually, years ago, every web page had a barcode like that on there. But you still see it in stores on packages. But the real problem is you don't know where it goes.
that
And
is
so
correct.
anything can lead you to the wrong place that can not only be malware, but actually, a bad site.
But in this case, you are the person creating the QR code, not somebody else, some
Yeah,
unknown.
you're not reading a malicious code. You're creating one.
Yes, but what I mean is other people are reluctant to
Yeah.
use it.
Well, you could go to public places where the government or the company has posted a valid QR code, and somebody else comes along and puts their own code on top of it
Like a sticker.
and makes it blend in with the billboard, and then you go along with your camera and you don't even realize that you're scanning a scammer's QR code.
Yeah, and that includes parking meters for quick.
Parking meters are very popular. You skipped over local send.
Yeah,
Well, you guys were, okay. Yes,
local
I
SIM
did.
is a good one for sharing data between lots of different devices,
Yeah, I rely on local send.
and that's multi-platform.
Multi-platform. Let's say you go to a function like a wedding or someplace where you have a whole bunch of people that are strangers, different, some have Android, some have iPhone, and you each take some pictures, but you want to share them with each other. It doesn't matter whether I have an Android phone or you have an iPhone. I can select 4 or 5 pictures in my gallery and then share them, in fact, with a QR code. So all you have to do is use your iPhone to scan my QR code, and then you will download the pictures that I have offered to you. Really neat little program to have. You can use it to send text and files and things between PCs in your house.
Almost every new piece of hardware I have gotten in the last 2 years, the owner's manual and the instruction books are all on a QR code on the unit with no paperwork. So to
Very-
actually get to learn to use the machine, you've got to download
Anything in the way
anything.
of documentation.
Yeah.
They don't give you paper anymore. They don't give you a CD or a DVD with all the manuals on it. You got to do a download.
Even my car came with the manual, not in print, but it's loaded into the car, into the dashboard. So if you want to read the manual, you got to click on it.
Yep.
But it's right there. It's handy. It's searchable. So that's
Until
kind
your
of nice.
battery dies.
It's an EV, so it's got a huge battery. So we're running low on time here, so we need to keep this flowing. We got this. Firefox was another thing that was listed. We all know what Firefox is. FF Share. Anyone know about this one?
I read the description of it on that article. Not something that I think a lot of people would be mainstream about. It's talking about trying to compress files into smaller files so that you could share them more easily. But
Oh yeah, that's going to be more complicated than people need to do.
Termux is for people that are Linux people. It's a Linux and type environment for your Android phone.
Mm-hmm.
Allows you to run Linux commands. You can install Linux software. One of the things that you can do with Termux that's popular amongst, you have to be fluent in Linux, and I guess you have to be a real Linux geek to want to do it this way. But let's say you have a collection of music or movies on your phone. You can install Termux and use a program called rclone to share all of that media out on the local Wi-Fi in the format of a media server, so that anybody else in the room that has a phone or a computer or anything that has VLC on it, they'll automatically detect your phone and be able to play all the music and videos that are on your phone.
Hmm. But you use Termux to write the application to do it?
I didn't write the software. It's already available.
Okay. All right, F-Droid?
F-Droid is a third-party app store where you can get software that's not in the Google Play App Store.
And Google is now going to modify Android to not allow side loading, which may apply to some of these applications on F-Droid.
Well, they're not blocking sideloading completely. They're blocking sideloading from people who don't fill out their forms in order to give up. They want you to give up your name and phone number and address and email and register with them. You don't necessarily have to host your files on the Google Play Store. You can host them wherever you want to and put them in whatever store, but you can't, a lot of the malware and fake software come from developers that obviously, for obvious reasons, don't want to give out their real name and address. And this is a way for Google to slap those guys on the hand. And but if your software is on F-Droid and you're a legitimate developer and you register your software with Google, it will install as a third-party app going forward.
Yeah, I cannot see Google being able to, or wanting to stop people being able to sideload, because some applications are not available in the Play Store. They're only available from the software vendor.
They're trying.
Yeah, I use software that's not in the Google Play Store. It's legitimate software.
Right.
In fact, most of it comes from GitHub, which is
Particularly,
owned.
if I may, the one application I'm referring to is the DJI Fly app that's used for their drones. You can only get it from DJI, and you can only sideload it. They won't let you normally load it.
If they
Right,
register,
but as long as they comply with Google's new rules, it will still sideload.
Right.
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 But it's trying to get the bad guys locked out, because they are not going to want to register their stuff. So it's protecting you from bad people.
Yeah, and Obtainium. Don't skip over Obtainium.
Obtainium. Okay, this is our last one.
Obtainium is a product that allows you to monitor third-party software that you get from anywhere, and it will take care of notifying you when there is an upgraded version of the software available. So let's say you install a piece of software from F-Droid and another piece of software from APK World and another piece of software from some other site. You can put the URL to that site in Obtainium, and it will monitor that app. And if the developer puts a new version out, it will send you an Android notification and say, hey, buddy, this third-party software that you installed has an update available.
Mm-hmm.
And then it will let you install it.
That's a good feature.
Bert?
I just wanted to point out, we were looking at a site from Make Use of, and they are one of the best places to get tech information every day. They send out several emails, and it's worth looking into to make sure to help you to keep up with the things going on.
Okay. And Tim, did you have something you wanted to throw in? No?
I
right.
don't have money.
Okay, we're at the end of our meeting. Is there any last questions for the group? Nope. If not, I will end this meeting. And thank everybody for coming tonight.